We're going to start today with a discussion on Entra ID Connect. And Microsoft Entra ID Connect was a very, very welcome addition to the technology platform when it was introduced, because previous to this, it was 2 or 3 different products that you typically had installed and had to keep them up to date. And they didn't have the same update paths, the same maintenance paths. So when they consolidated them into one product, it was very, very welcome. I was working in the product when that happened. Now, we're here in the objectives. Okay, so yesterday we spent some time working talking about ID Fix, and we're going to spend some time here this morning. Yeah, well, it's morning, at least here in Arizona. And we're going to go through several topics. The first one is the Microsoft Entra ID Connect. So there's 2 main products that we're going to talk about as far as synchronization products. One of them is called Entra ID Connect. The other one is called Cloud Sync. Sometimes it's called Entra Cloud Sync. Sometimes it's called Entra ID Cloud Sync. But right now we're focused on the Entra ID Connect one. Microsoft put out a notice to make sure if you have version 1.x installed to download and install version 2.x. They made major updates to the product, and there's a chance that if you have an older version of the product that's in the 1.x version, you may run into errors that are not obvious what you're dealing with. So you want to, whenever you're implementing this from the get-go, you want to go to Microsoft's Download Center and download the latest version of the product, and that should ensure that you have at least version 2. something. So Microsoft Entra ID Connect version 2.x has a couple of areas to know about. First off, it uses locally SQL Server 2019 local DB, and the previous version shipped was SQL Server version 2012 local DB, and that went out of extended support July of 2022. So you got to have your database solution in support. Also, Microsoft leveraged the latest version of the Microsoft Authentication Library, which is the code base, the code base which Microsoft keeps up to date for enterprise applications. And so you want the latest one of that. And then the Visual C++ Redlist 14 SQL Server 2019 uses Redlist 14 runtime. So that library has been updated. So these are major updates to a software product. And that's why they're like, look, if you have version 1.x, you need to upgrade the product. Why would somebody have version 1.x and not update the product? Because when it comes to authentication, once you get it up and running, you don't want to mess with it. This is not an area you want to go, oh, that last update took everything down. You don't want, once this is up and running, you're like, let's just keep that up and running, because it was hard enough sometimes to get it up and running, and that's authentication, people getting into the system. A couple things about this also, all binaries are signed with SHA-2, so Microsoft no longer supports SHA-1 signed libraries, and it's supported on SQL Server 2016 or later. A lot of people, when this first came out, were so excited to deploy it, and they have it running on what at this point in time are older versions of the server operating system. And so Microsoft said, look, we want to have Server 2016 or later, and it uses PowerShell 5, and a lot of the commandlets are for Entra ID Connect. They are still in PowerShell 5. So where do we see this? Well, where we want to go is we want to go to the Entra ID Admin Center. So I'm going to go there now. Let's see. I want to make sure and have the right profile loaded. Here we go. I'm going to go to my demo machine, and I'm going to go to the Entra Admin Center, so entra.microsoft.com. I'll go ahead and just temporarily close all the other tabs just so I can keep everything nice and organized. And the area that we're looking at is here under External Identities. And if I expand, I'm going to click Show More here first off. And then I'm going to expand External Identities. And there's quite a few options here for expanding identities. And what I want to do is I want to be able to look at if I'm dealing with things between different tenancies, I'm going to need to set up things here in this cross-tenant settings. Now, this is not something that you have to worry about if you're not adding multiple tenancies, but that is supported. I mentioned on the first day. If you're synchronizing across tenants, then this is where you're going to need to go. Cross-tenant synchronization is a Microsoft Entra ID feature. It enables you to automatically synchronize identities across tenants in your organization. Most of the time, you're not going to be dealing with this. You're going to just be dealing with a single deployment with a single tenancy. Most of us will deal with that. We're going to talk about the idea of if you're supporting multiple forests. But if you're dealing with multiple tenancies, you're going to want to know about these two links here, the cross-tenant access settings and the cross-tenant synchronization. For the average of us, we're going to be here under hybrid management. And then we're going to have a link right here that says Microsoft Entra Connect. And I'm going to click on that. And that's going to take me to this page. In this page, what's going to happen is I'm going to have two options in this menu option, Cloud Sync and Connect Sync. Let's see what this says. I'm just noticing. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to ignore that. What we're talking about right now is the second one, Connect Sync. Connect Sync is the installable version of the product. You download and install the product on premises, and then once you get that installed, you go through the form, which I'm going to go through, and once everything's installed, it will automatically run synchronization jobs to either create up an Entra ID or update objects that have been created, so that you now have two objects representing one user or group that actually exists in your on-premises deployment, your on-premises Active Directory. I'm going to open up this link to the Microsoft Entra deployment plans. They get very deep on this in this article. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send this over to the chat. So I'm going to put that here. I'm going to say article on hybrid identities and configurations. And I'm going to paste that up in the chat, hopefully. I always like to test my link after I paste it. Yep, that worked good. You can't see where I clicked because that's off screen, but it did work. Everything's good. We're good to go there. So in your deployment, what you have to do is you have to set up, let me get up here, and organize what are going to be the different roles. So to get this rolling out in a new organization, this article defines sponsor, end users, IT support manager, identity architect, application business owner, security owner, compliance manager, and then they designate responsibilities. I would spend not a huge amount of time, but a little bit of time on this table that's in that article just to be familiar with these terms and the definition of those terms. I don't recall specifically being asked about those exact terms, like what they mean, but it is possible that could happen. All right, so this is where you go, and when you set up Entra ID Connect, you're going to see that this dashboard is going to reflect your configuration, okay? It's going to set up your configuration or reflect your configuration. So this is more of a read scenario. A little bit later, we're going to talk about the other version, which is Cloud Sync. And when I click on Cloud Sync, this is much more of an interactive experience where I go and set up a configuration. I pass in scoping filters, which are, exact descriptions that you would get inside of Active Directory. Looking over here, so properties, the properties of the provisions, getting started, your attribute mapping, and the scoping filters is where you can in Cloud Connect. For example, I set up one OU, and you give the total distinguished name of that OU from where it is that you're synchronizing from. But we'll come to that because we are going to spend some time on that. But for right now, we're looking at Connect Sync. Now, Microsoft gives a summary of the two options. What is Cloud Sync? And they give you a link to an article there. Is Cloud Sync right for you? For quite a bit of time, I felt like they were really pushing Cloud Sync. I feel like now it's kind of backed off a little bit, and it seems like they're both going to be supported. For a minute, I thought that that it wasn't going to be the case. But they do have this view comparison chart here, and they have this highlighted features that are supported in Cloud Sync versus features that are supported in Entra ID Connect, which is considered to be Connect Sync here. Now, when you use Connect Sync, you download the installation package. Let's see if I can go here, access permissions, no, manage. I'm just trying to see if I can find, there it is. Download Sync Agent. This is for Connect Sync. So if you're doing this for the first time, or you want to get the latest and greatest, see if I can open this in a new, I'm going to click here. You'll want to download this agent. So you have to accept the rules. And you typically are downloading this into the environment you're actually going to install it in, because then you just basically do the installation. So either way, you come to the hybrid management, Microsoft Entra Connect. If you're doing Connect Sync, you'll start by going to get started, and down at the bottom, download the Connect Sync agent. If you're doing Cloud Sync, you'll download a provisioning agent. We'll talk about that when we get to that part. Now, in your lab, I don't know if they've updated the instructions. I'd have to check that, but they used to have you go to like this whole complicated download center. You don't need to do that. You can just go to this hybrid management, Microsoft Entra Connect, go to get started, click on manage, and download the agent right from there. That's definitely your best bet. If you look at the downloads, it's just an MSI. Notice they never renamed the MSI, Azure AD Connect .msi. They did not update the name of that MSI. But that's what you do. Once you have that downloaded and installed in your environment, and I'll be going through that process, then you begin configuring it to how you want it to operate inside of your organization. So here's a screenshots of where to go. And again, all of the slides used for this run of the course will be uploaded. I think that like on that Thursday evening, it might take a day after that, this Thursday, so it might be Friday morning, but you'll have access to all these. So I took a lot of screenshots in preparing these, just so you could kind of see. You could see if I go to the properties of that application, the installers, in this case, is version 2.2.8.0, probably the one I just downloaded later, and the idea there is at least version 2.x. Once it's downloaded into your environment, you basically begin the configuration. This will support a large amount of objects. If you have a massive directory with like 1 million users or something, or 1 million objects between users and groups, you may need to install and configure your own instance of Microsoft SQL Server to handle that load, but very rarely does it exceed that. Microsoft publishes articles about that. You know, you agree. I think it still also says, I did these screenshots not too long ago, it still says Azure AD Connect. I keep waiting for it to say Entra ID Connect. It's recommended by a lot of people to start off using what's called the express settings. So when you first are running through the configuration, you'll have an option for express settings. The reason that you would choose express settings, because most likely you will not keep it at the settings that come with express settings, is it gets all the gears turning and the wheels turning and everything running, and you get to see in your tenancy whether or not it even worked. And if it did, you can then go back and make configuration changes and restrict the user objects and group objects that are actually being synchronized and clean all that up pretty quickly. However, when you go through and set everything up for express, even if you do express settings, you can uncheck the box at the end that says Start Synchronization on Close, and you could go back and it will install all the software. You can make those adjustments, but sometimes it's really good to see that it's all working and then go back and make those changes later. So I've been working with the product since it came out. So I tend to use express settings, but then I don't synchronize for the first time. I go through and make the changes. I feel pretty confident that's going to work if needed. So these are express settings. It tells you what's involved in that. You might actually get asked about some of these bullet points, right? So configure synchronization of identities, the current AD forest, and it tells you what it is. Configure password hash. This is the default. You will definitely be asked about this. So know that the default settings with express settings take a hash of the passwords being used by your on-premises users and put them up into a secure location in Entra ID. So at the moment you're done, they use same password, not single password, but same password. Start an initial synchronization, synchronize all attributes, enable auto upgrade. These are all things that express settings do. So it's generally considered to be a good idea. What you're actually doing, and this is our version of a graphic from Microsoft Learn. On the left-hand side of this slide, it might be on the right side, the part that says Active Directory Forest, you're taking objects from there, typically not all of them, but select ones, and you're taking those objects and you're pushing them up into something called a metaverse. And in that metaverse, you have a staging object which exists in memory, and then that object takes a look at the connector to your cloud, your Entra ID tenancy, and it basically goes through a series of questions. And in the plain English version of that is, hey, Entra ID, do you have this user? And Entra ID says, well, yes, I do. This is all right. Well, when's the last time we updated that user? And so I don't know, 2 days ago. And then on premises says, oh, I have a couple changes to that user object that have happened between 2 days ago and now. Now this would be happening every 30 minutes. I'm just trying to use plain English. And then Entra ID goes, okay, build up the object in the metaverse, and then we'll overwrite or update the object up here in Entra ID. And it keeps these objects synchronized. They represent one user or one group, but the properties or attributes about those users or groups are synchronized and kept the same. And typically, they're going to be going one way from Active Directory to Entra ID. So out of the box, you don't have Entra ID objects being written back to on-premises. There's two areas where you can configure that. The most common ones are, which are the most common ones? The most common one is if you want people to have self-service password reset, you allow them to, if they make an update to their password online, it writes back to on-prem. And the other one is if you want the Microsoft 365 groups that are created when you create teams or just the groups to appear in the global address list in an on-premises Microsoft Exchange deployment, you can configure group right back as well. Again, these are just definitions. The connector space, every connected directory has a connector space where objects are staged. The metaverse objects to synchronize are created here based on rules. Directories are populated from the metaverse. Sync rules, basically filtering, and you can do some manipulation of objects. It's pretty rare in my experience, but it's possible. And then the run profiles, it basically copies them and updates what's going on in Entra ID. I don't remember specifically being asked about any of these 4 properties. I went a little deep on that for the class. If you generally get asked, are the objects pushed into an area called the metaverse, that you might get a question kind of something like that. So I wanted to include that just in case. As you go through the configuration process, you will be asked for some credentials. The first one will be you'll need to have a global administrator account. This needs to be put in there, and you need to put in the correct credentials, because this account is going to be needed to be able to provision the product with putting permissions to the accounts that are automatically created. And then you're going to need an on-premises enterprise admin account as well. This is used just for configuration and creating, and it will create the local service account. So you will need those credentials. Once you go through that, you'll get a summary. And then if you check the box that I've highlighted there, start the synchronization process when configuration completes, it will run a full configuration, that will, if it works, then you know you got everything done right, and you can go through and customize any of the properties that you want to customize. But that's kind of the one they recommend that you do keep that, but that's up to you. You may get some warnings here. So you'll see, like, for example, the configuration is complete. You can now log on to Azure Office 365 portal verify. They haven't updated that to Entra ID. They haven't updated that to the Microsoft 365 portal. The Active Directory recycle bin is not enabled. Okay, this is going to be something, and they have a link to the article. You'll definitely want to go back and activate the recycle bin, the Active Directory recycle bin. And then Azure Active Directory is configured to use the attribute ms-ds-consistency GUID as the source anchor attribute. That means that when you have your property on premise, so let's say this represents a user, I'll kind of draw a robot here, and that's my on-premise user, and then it's synchronizing with, and this is supposed to be my cloud user, my Entra ID cloud user robot. The way that it identifies which of these objects to update is it looks at this attribute, the ms-ds consistency GUID. It is possible to change that. I wouldn't do it on purpose. I wouldn't do it unless I was forced to. We'll look at some reasons why that might happen in our troubleshooting section. But it says, I put do this, and then note this. So that's what I put on that slide. Once you do that, you can verify your success. It's very easy to verify your success, especially if this is the first time you ran it. You can just go to admin.microsoft.com, go to all users, filter by synchronized users. That's going to be that little icon that looks, I do believe it's meant to look like a server, okay? And then if you have objects that have that icon, then it worked, at least for those objects, so you should be good to go. You also want to verify success signing in with an identity. That is a synchronized identity. So this is one of the places where it's okay to, create a test user and have the credentials and verify that. The users are not automatically licensed, so keep that in mind. You still have to go through the process of assigning licenses, but it does create the user objects in Entra ID, which are visible in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. A couple things about your synchronized identities. Whoops, I meant to do this. When you're first launching this, sometimes users may potentially, need a little bit of training. They may or may not understand what's going on. They don't have to understand the processes, but they may get confused depending on how you configure it. So it may be a time to, if you're doing this brand new, to do some training. That's one of the reasons Microsoft absolutely recommends having a pilot period so that you can get this in place. That's just showing you that it worked. Now that the Active Directory recycle bin, this would typically be something that would have to be configured by the Active Directory local on-premises administrator, which you may or may not be someone that does, but you can go to the Active Directory Administrative Center, not the users and computers, but the actual Active Directory Administrative Center. You can highlight and make sure you're on the correct domain. And then on the right-hand side under tasks, one of them says Enable Recycle Bin, and then you can go ahead and recycle that. I did some screen captures of that. Now, in this environment that I'm going to be showing you, so I'm going to come over here to my demo machine, and I'm connected here to my domain controller. I already have Entra ID Connect installed and running in this domain controller. Let me minimize PowerShell here. Once you have it running, you will have instances running on a regular basis, and it will honor whatever rules that you have. So right now, this is my Active Directory users and computers, and I kind of went over this a little earlier in the week, but I'll kind of review. I have a couple OUs. First off, I have an OU called Cloud Connect, and I have a couple of users in that OU, or several users. I also have OUs of finance, HR, IT, marketing, and sales. And in this environment, for this demo environment, I only want to synchronize users or groups that are in these specific organizational units. That's how I'm controlling which objects get synchronized and created up in Entra ID. I also have other OUs like ID no sync and marketing no sync and sales no sync and finance no sync. The idea there is I have people that are on premises working in those departments. They're not part of my pilot program, so I don't want them synchronized. So I have not included those OUs. Now, when I first configured Entra ID Connect, if I chose the express settings, it would synchronize every object that is the type of object that can be synchronized. So for example, it will specifically not synchronize remote desktop users or print users or computers. It will synchronize users and security groups basically. But what I typically do is when you install Entra ID Connect and it shows up still as Azure AD Connect, then it will actually install 3 individual components: Azure AD Connect, Synchronization Rules Editor, and Synchronization Service. If you click Synchronization Service, and a lot of people that install this will just keep this open at all times, it will give you a running tally of every synchronization job that has happened. And you can see one happened at 4:40 a.m. One happened at 4:39. These will happen together. This is an import and an export. These are really just one job typically, or when they're a minute apart. And you can click on any one of those and see what has actually happened. You can get in and see things that have changed or not changed. In order to set up filtering, so if you did express settings and wanted to come back later, you would come to the Windows screen down here. You'd find under Azure AD Connect, you'd click the synchronization service, and that would open up this window. And then what you do is you'd click connectors here. And you're going to need to have the enterprise admin password on the connectors. These are currently the 2 directories that are connected. And if I want to control the containers in Active Directory Domain Services, I can select that one and then click connectors. Double click connectors, okay, and scene. Oh, I could double click, sorry, I double clicked the line item. I meant to click that. And here are all the properties of this connector. And what I could do is I could say, I want to go to configure directory partitions, and then I want to set the containers. Okay, so I click containers. It's going to make me authenticate. Right now, the service is running under this created local account. To make these changes, I'm going to need to sign in with an account that has administrative privileges in this domain and on this box. So I'm going to sign in here. Hopefully I signed in correctly there. This is select containers. If you notice, there's my finance, there's my HR, there's my IT, there's my marketing, and if I scroll down, there's going to be one for sales. If I wanted to add one, I could say, oh, I'm going to add the IT no sync OU. If I want to remove one, I'm going to say I'm not going to sync IT. I'm not going to make the change. I just wanted to show you where you can go to make that change, and you can make those adjustments. Now, whenever I do that, whenever I make a change to my Azure AD Connect configuration or settings, I will open up PowerShell and I will run the following command. I will say start-AD sync, I don't know, cycle. It's a weird command. It's an interesting command anyways. It's like the person just like to say things twice. AD sync cycle. And then you have to pass in a parameter, and that parameter is policy type, and you'll either choose Delta or Initial. Whenever I make a change and I want to force a complete update to the directory as if it was the first time when I made configuration changes, I will choose Initial. Convert. Oh, let me try this again. Sorry, CLS. Let me see here. We'll try it again. start. I don't know why that came up like that. AD sync cycle policy type initial. Maybe I misspelled initial. I must have misspelled it. I'm seeing a success here. That doesn't mean it's done. It kind of makes, oh, it's already done. That just means the connections are all good. Thank you, Chuck. I misspelled initial. The connections are all good, and it's starting the process. And so I like to do that. You have two options. You have delta or initial that you'll use. Delta means just synchronize the changes since the last initial or delta synchronization. Initial means basically repopulate everything as if it was the first time. So this is just showing you how I configured OU filtering. And what I did here is I used PowerShell to compare before and after OU filtering. So I ran the express settings, and I said, after I did that, I connected to MSOL service using the now deprecated MSOL MS Online module for PowerShell. And I did a $ open parens get-msol user-all synchronized.count, and it brought back 1737. And then I said get all users and hybrid identities, and that would be whether they're synchronized or not, and it brought me back 1750. So that means in that deployment I had I don't know, 13 cloud accounts. Now, configuring OU filtering, when you very first do this, okay, the very first time you set up Entra ID Connect, and this may be an exam question, you can choose to use security groups. So you could say only use these Active Directory security groups from on-premises. Only the first time. They really do not mean you to do that in production. When you go to Cloud Sync, you can actually use security groups as an in-production filtering option. OUs are my choice after doing this since the product's been out. One of the reasons you can't do OUs is an object can only be in one OU. So if you have other dependencies about the way you've configured your organizational units in Active Directory, and you're not going to be in a scenario to change those for this, then you may have to go with other options. Some of the other options are you can put in one of the pre-stage custom attribute for Active Directory objects. You can put a property, and then you can build your filtering based around the value or lack of a value of that property. I have done that, but it's not fun, okay? So once you have Azure AD Connect or Entra ID Connect installed, you'll see the services. Again, you can open up this. A lot of people will have this open to get that running tally. You can click on any one of those, see what's synchronized. It can be very helpful to troubleshoot. If you want to change to the filtering, I just did some screenshots here of what I just demonstrated, and then that's how you can do OU filtering. Now, once that happens, again, I like to always force a synchronization. Again, this is just information about the initial and delta. Notice on unspecified, I literally said I'd never use it, so I don't even know what it does. And so I didn't even bother to look it up. I don't think you'll get asked about the unspecified parameter on the start-AD sync cycle here. Now notice that before I configured OU filtering, I had 1,737 synchronized objects, okay, before I configured OU filtering, and then 1750 if I included all the cloud and synchronized. After I put in synchronization, I only have 308 synchronized objects and 321. So I think the differences are still the same. Like that's still the same amount of difference, 13 of them. It's just that now I have many fewer objects, which means if I run a full synchronization, it's going to take less time. And it also doesn't have a bunch of user objects that I'm not planning on licensing for whatever reason. So the module AD Sync, the PowerShell module, they still haven't updated. They don't call this Entra ID Connect Sync or anything. It's called AD Sync. When you install Entra ID Connect on premises, it installs this PowerShell module into the machine. I did get command module AD Sync sort name out grid view, and that way I could kind of take a look. I like to do that to be able to I like the out grid view, so I can kind of get a good, nice, easy on the eyes view. You can remove columns. You can make it zoom in. It's very easy. And then I said, how many commands are in that module? And last time I ran it, came back at 117. This command you're going to do quite a bit if you're in this role, especially when you're first starting, getting everything up and running, or if you have changes that you've made on premises. Okay. What group do you need to member? Chuck, I'll address that in just a few moments. In this, if you make updates to your on-premises Active Directory objects, then typically what happens is when you're making changes to those Active Directory objects, you probably want those changes reflected sooner than what's currently, then you don't want to wait for the next synchronization. So in those cases, typically you'll come in, open PowerShell and do start-AD sync cycle. If your directory is huge, you have a lot of objects, you may just do policy type Delta. That will be shorter. If you're asked on the exam, they'll probably want you to choose Delta if you're just trying to update the objects you changed to. But for me in production, I tend to do initial. Chuck, I'm not ignoring you. I will come back to that. The policy type Delta will only update any changes made to objects that have been changed between the last initial or Delta and when you're running this process. You can actually get the sync scheduler. So this, if you're interested to see what, how often is the synchronization process happening, you can do get-AD sync scheduler and we'll bring back the properties. You can change these properties if you need to, but because you have access to the start-AD sync cycle, Delta and initial, you probably don't need to actually change this. It could be the case that you need to, but that's what's running. These are the properties. The default is every 30 minutes it will update the synchronization differences. If you want to run get-msol dir sync features, duplicate UPN resiliency, this will verify the duplicate UPN attribute resiliency is working. This is a troubleshooting tool that's built into the product. You can run that command. I very rarely ran this command, but I just do know that I was glad I knew about it when I needed to run it, when I was trying to troubleshoot something. So you want to see enabled to true, which is enabled here. You also can do get-dir sync features, feature duplicate proxy access, or duplicate proxy address resiliency. Blah. It's a mouthful. You'll want to see that to true. These are built in. Now, Chuck asked a very good question. He said, hey, it says that the service isn't running. Well, let's see, I think I have that built in here actually. So one of the things that can happen is, and this happens to me sometimes when I do updates to the system. I'll do CLS here, and I'm going to run this command, get-service, and then the service AD sync. I'll hit I'll hit run selection. Right now my service is running, but it has been the case when I've updated a server and it rebooted that, and every once in a while this service will stop. You'll typically get a bunch of messages if you're the admin in your email that, hey, there's a problem with your synchronization. If you go to the admin.microsoft.com and you have the synchronization card on your desktop, it will cause you to have, you'll have a red mark. So if I go to my admin center, so I'm gonna click here, I'm gonna go to admin.microsoft.com. If you're a global admin, you can actually customize where these cards are on your home screen. I always like to have my Entra ID Connect first and foremost, and then this one moves. You definitely want to see these two check marks. If you don't, you're gonna depending on how you have it configured, you probably want to immediately take a look at what's going on if you see a yellow or a red. For me, in my experience, most of the time, if I see it red, it's because this service stopped. So I'll do this. Sometimes I'll do on the server get-service and I'll do in quotes, and I'll do star sync star like that. And I just to make sure, but you know, it's definitely, this is the name, AD Sync. And Chuck asked, it says service not started, your account is not a member of the required security group. In this particular case, Chuck, you would just have to have permissions to be able to start or stop a service on the server. It's not, as far as I know, anything to do with anything specific about starting that service. It's just that you have the ability to start or stop a service on the server. So if you're unable to do it because of that, you're getting that message you're getting, I would check to make sure you have the permissions to start and stop services on that server. If it's more than that, then it may require deeper troubleshooting. I'm not aware of the AD Sync service having specific properties that would override an administrator's ability to start or stop services on the server. Well, it's possible that you have to also be a local admin. If it's on a domain controller, that could be a little bit of a challenge. If it's not on a domain controller, there's a couple of products, and this is like kind of one of them, where you're in the domain. Okay, let me see if I gotta deal with this. Okay. Going back to my years of being a consultant installing SharePoint on premises. When you used to install SharePoint on premises, when you installed the actual supporting services, you had to be in the local administrators group on the machine where you were installing those services that were supporting SharePoint, okay? Now, if you're in the domain admins group on a domain joined server, the domain admins group is automatically put into the local users and groups administrators group. However, for that specific set of products, for whatever reason, whoever designed them, the person or account logged on to install that product or service on that server, it was a member joined server that was part of a domain. You're in the domain admins group. The domain admins group is in the local admins group on that local machine. You still had to explicitly be in that local administrators group on that machine. And I think what you're describing sounds like a scenario like that.